The Night Stalker took the lives of 13 people. Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker, isn't a fictional character in a movie or TV series. He's a real serial killer from 1985. The Night Stalker can rightly be considered one of the most terrible and most dangerous people on the planet. He's just one of the criminals I'll tell you about today. Let's go. However, let us first travel from Anchorage to Russia, or rather back to the Soviet Union as it was then. That's where one of the most ruthless monsters in modern history operated from the late 70s into the early 90s. It took 13 years to catch Soviet serial killer Andrei Chikatilo. He was called the Mad Beast, the Red Ripper, the Forest Lane Maniac, and the Butcher of Rostov. Chikatilo had at least 53 terrible crimes against women and children on his account, which for far too long could not be solved. According to YouTube rules, I can't tell you what Chikatilo did and how he did it, but he behaved like a classic maniac, doing absolutely horrible things. It seems that everything of the most shocking and disgusting nature imaginable is in his criminal biography. Like many serial killers, from the outside, Chikatilo tried to seem normal. He was a husband and a father. He was educated. He even worked as a teacher and educator for a while. It didn't go unnoticed by his students. Unfortunately, Chikatilo was neglected for too long, and others were blamed for his crimes. These included people with mental problems and random victims of police brutality. One unfortunate man was even shot for a horrific act he didn't commit. And all this time, for more than 10 years, the real beast remained at large. Once, however, he was apprehended and then released because of a fatal mistake, one that cost the lives of several more people. Traces of evidence left by Chikatilo were found on the bodies of his victims, but when they were compared to the perpetrator's blood type, they didn't match. That's a rare phenomenon seen only in one person in a few million. 6 years later, Chikatilo was finally caught and confessed to all his crimes. Despite attempts to act like a madman, the monster was found sane and he was sentenced to death. Needless to say, a personality of such a terrifying scale left its mark on history. TV shows and movies have been made about Chikatilo, including Citizen X, Evelinko, and Child 44, based in part or in whole on the Red Ripper case. But while Chikatilo seemed like a quiet, unsociable man who was difficult and unpleasant to talk to, John Wayne Gacy was his opposite, a successful businessman, philanthropist, family man, and respectable citizen who liked to dress up as a clown and entertain kids. He would be the last person police would suspect of kidnapping more than 30 teenagers and young men. Yes, a homicidal clown rings any bells. Take it, Georgie. Many believe that Gacy was the prototype for Pennywise the Clown from Stephen King's novel It, although the author himself denied the connection. For a long time, Gacy built a career and made a life for himself without drawing the attention of the police. But in 1967, he committed his first crime against a 15-year-old boy. Fortunately, the boy survived, and Gacy was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Perhaps the story could have ended differently and many people would still be alive. But during his incarceration, Gacy quickly gained a reputation as a model prisoner, so he was released after only 18 months. This happened on June 18, 1970, and as early as January 2, 1972, Gacy took the life of a new victim, almost accidentally. One crime triggered an avalanche of subsequent crimes. While taking lives, Gacy continued to be regarded as a decent citizen. He acted as a clown at various events because he simply liked it, and his victims counted in the dozens. Eventually, Gacy was caught. His conviction for 33 murders was the biggest in the history of the United States at the time. Gacy was sentenced to death and spent most of his time in prison drawing. More often than not, he painted creepy clowns. These paintings were purchased by various galleries and private collectors, and they're still exhibited around the world and cost thousands of dollars.
This here is the Hi-Ho series. It's called Hi-Ho Around the Campfire.
As in the case of Chikatilo, several films have been made about John Gacy. To Catch a Killer, for example. Gacy is also mentioned in the TV series Prison Break, and he appears in American Horror Story and Supernatural. However, not all of the greatest criminals have already been brought to justice. Daywood Ibrahim is a gangster who's considered one of the most hunted men in India. For his capture, they're promising a reward of $25 million. Daywood Ibrahim is accused of murder, extortion, trafficking illegal substances, and other offenses. In 2001, the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Forbes magazine ranked Daywood number 3 on their list of the world's 10 most wanted criminals. But it all started out small. It was theft and fraud, then car theft, and petty smuggling amid street wars. Then there was more. His crimes would progress to traditional extortion, arms sales, then to the control of almost every gambling and drinking establishment in the city. Gradually, the gangster began to infiltrate legitimate businesses, such as producing many Indian films through his organization called D Company. For a long time, he wasn't particularly wanted until a series of bombings in Bombay in 1993. Everything pointed to Daywood's involvement, and he became the most wanted man in India. He was subsequently put on an international wanted list. They say the gangster is now hiding in Pakistan, but Daywood has still not been caught. One look at Jason Barnum is enough to make you want to cross the street, even if you're just looking at a picture. Barnum has a skull tattoo on his head, and he has painted his eye black, and he otherwise seems willing to do anything to look as menacing as possible. But it wasn't just about looks. The man broke into homes at night and robbed sleeping Anchorage, Alaska residents. He was also involved in a carjacking, and during his apprehension, he opened fire and wounded one of the law enforcement officers, fortunately not fatally. Barnum later admitted that he'd only committed crimes to get money to buy illegal substances. In the end, the portrait of the criminal was so unambiguous that the sentence hardly surprised anyone. Barnum received 22 years in prison, though with a parole in about 10 years. Maybe he'll have changed by then, but I wouldn't want to be around when this guy gets released. However, it's not just men who can be criminals and invoke terror in ordinary people. From 1989 to 1990, Eileen Warnos robbed 7 men and also took their lives.
And he said I did the most horrendous crime in the whole wide world.
Not true.
I guess not.
The crimes took place on Florida highways, and all of the victims were single, middle-aged male drivers who agreed to give Eileen a ride. The unfortunate victims' cars were left in the woods, and the woman always used a .22 caliber pistol as her weapon. In the end, Eileen was caught. Witness statements and fingerprints helped. She was given 6 death sentences. You may have seen the movie Monster, where Charlize Theron played the role of Warnos. The actress gained 14 kilograms, or 35 pounds, shaved her eyebrows, and wore dentures to look similar to her creepy heroine. The work put into her character succeeded. As the critics praised Theron's efforts in acting, she won an Oscar and a Golden Globe.
Oh, this has been such an incredible year.
One can only guess how psychologically difficult it was to try on the image of a killer. The story of Rodney Alcala is different from the others I've told. His good looks, outstanding intelligence, sense of humor, and charm allowed him not just to gain the trust of his victims, but to literally charm them. The true nature of the criminal was revealed only when it was too late. Alcala played with his victims and liked to photograph them.
Very nice.
Rodney often introduced himself to victims as a professional photographer. He almost got caught in his first crime against an 8-year-old girl, but Rodney evaded capture by changing his name and fleeing to the other side of the country. He went to film school with Roman Polanski and worked at a children's camp in the summer. And all the while, he was on the FBI's list of most wanted men. Alcala was caught once, but he only spent 34 months in jail and was released again. Charm seemed to open any door for this criminal. Rodney even appeared on the television show The Dating Game in 1978, and he won it.
That's your number 1, all right.
All the while, he continued to kidnap more and more victims until he was finally caught. Because Alcala committed his crimes in different states, he received a mixed sentence, both life in prison and the death penalty. Investigators believe he massacred 130 women and girls. They found photographs which they believe were kept as trophies by the killer. Some of the photos are still under investigation. If Alcala, because of his charm, is known as another Ted Bundy, Dennis Rader became famous in a different way between 1974 and 1991. Rader took the lives of 10 people in Wichita and Park City, Kansas. He sent mocking letters to the police and newspapers describing the details of his crimes. Most of his victims were women, and almost all died for the same reasons. Perhaps the Rader case would have remained unsolved, like the Zodiac case, if the criminal, after several years of silence, hadn't started sending new letters. But there was the address, the DNA tests, and then Rader was finally arrested. At the trial, he confessed everything. He even seemed to apologize to the relatives of the victims. But according to the prosecutor, his speech was more reminiscent of one at the Academy Awards. Rader was sentenced to at least 175 years in prison, plus life sentences. His story inspired Stephen King's short story, A Good Marriage, and the movie of the same name. Today, the outlaw is serving his sentence in an American prison. The earliest possible date for his release is February 26, 2080. All of the criminals I've described so far have acted completely deliberately, but not Mary Mallon. This woman was also known as Typhoid Mary. She is believed to be the first asymptomatic carrier of typhoid fever in the United States. During her time as a cook, at least 53 people contracted the disease, 3 of whom died.
Mary Mallon, it is you, isn't it?
But Mary didn't just keep working with food. She flatly denied she was sick. Men, women, adults, and children all became Mary's unwitting victims, and the girl still refused to believe it. In the end, Mary was involuntarily quarantined in a hospital on North Brother Island, where she eventually died. Today, the phrase Typhoid Mary refers to carriers of dangerous diseases, those who spread a disease and refuse to do anything about it. Be safe out there. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Are there any fascinating serial killers or true crime cases for you that we didn't cover here? Let us know in the comments. See you later.